I came up with a list of questions.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, that's fair. Okay, good morning, this is Senate Natural Resources and Energy on Thursday, April 10th, and we are starting off the morning talking about H41, related to stormwater, and then just after that, we're gonna be doing some intros of other bills that I'm hoping to get done for the end of the session. So, yeah, let's yeah, we have our budget council, welcome. So I'm thinking about starting with the end first here, because seems like the study is the most interesting and tricky thing. So I'd love to get people's thoughts on the study. Which starts on page 11, and then so I think we're gonna send Mr. O'Grady back with some direction, generally speaking, to go with the study. And then maybe we can, if we still have time with him, then we can go back and start the rest of the bill. But I feel like this is maybe a good moment to have a general discussion just to start thinking about the study, because I think the study is a place where we can capture some unresolved questions or issues that feel outstanding that are not otherwise covered. So if we were to incorporate things into the study or create a potentially like a parallel study, then what would we want to be in that? And so maybe just as a place to start, do folks have any reactions or thoughts as to either just in terms of like broadly speaking, where are we at, or any reactions to what we heard yesterday, or issues that you see that are not otherwise resolved that we need to tackle? Because just to say it, I would like to not be here having the same discussion in 3 years. So how can we set ourselves up to use our time well in 3 years? So I realize there's a lot of questions in there. I want to open it up first.
So there's a lot of things about claim. One thing is there's not a lot of money to do a very overall cost a lot of money. So one thing perhaps take a look at is there's another thing to take a look at. One of them is proximity to waterway, and and if we're going to prioritize, how do we prioritize? Yeah, proximity to water plates is like one. The other thing, well, maybe that's what the big thing is, but we want to look at prioritizing or how to prioritize.
Yeah, good.
So like I said last night, I read the statute a bunch of times to try to understand it, and then came up with a bunch of questions, but I did just have a brief conversation with the secretary, just coincidentally, and I think some of the questions that I have, and also the question that Senator Bonner just said, they might already have some of this information. So for example, one of mine was like, could we ask them to come back with a priority list? And the secretary said that in some ways they have that, and have it sort of categorized. Because I was like, can it be categorized? Because that big list that is just by town that you sent me, it's just just a list, and I was like, how could it be prioritized? Could it be categorized? Could it be, put in order of cost? Could it, all these different ways? I think they might have some of that information, so it may be helpful to have them back in to talk to us specifically about it. And also, I had a lot of questions about, because it's not clear, in statute, obviously, how did we come up, and Michael probably knows this actually, because you were the only one who was here at the time, you drafted it, right? Like, how did they come up with 3 acres? Because 3 acres seems kind of random, but I just heard the explanation from the secretary, and it makes more sense when you hear it. I don't know if you want to explain, because if you probably explain it better, but.
Secretary said.
Well, I don't wanna speak for her, so anybody who's listening, this is not me speaking for her, and she should come in and explain it. But basically, when the EPA gave us the TMDL and said, this is what you have to meet. They had all these different categories of ways to reduce the phosphorus in the lake, and then when it came to stormwater, that there was an amount of reduction that was attributed to stormwater. And they had to figure out how could they get there using all the impervious surfaces. And they basically backed into 3 acres was the amount that would, if we used 3 acres, we could get to the amount of reduction that was required for that portion of the TMDL. Is that?
Yeah, it's the model,
Yeah.
they had to find in that component of the model. The load reduction from developed plans, and they ran the model with different alternatives, and this is the one that kicked out.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and that, because I mean, one of the things I was thinking last night as I was trying to figure out how to solve this problem was, what could we? Is there a portion of residential property that we could exempt? And have it just be commercial? And what I just heard from the secretary is if we exempted residential, then we would have to go to a smaller parcel for commercial. So it might be 1 acre or even a half an acre. And so it would be more of a burden on smaller commercial development. And so in order to keep the parcels large enough, they had to include residential. If the more we exempt, the more specific they have to get with what is included. And this is to meet the federal required TMDL or phosphorus reduction. So anything that we tweak has implications on the other side, because which is the case with so many things we do in this building. But I think having them come back in and us get into those details with them might help us figure out what questions we don't already have answers to, and where is there wiggle room?
We're planning on having Neil Kamen in tomorrow.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, and I think when they originally came in, I didn't know enough about this to even ask them the right questions, and now I feel like I know more.
Yep, I think that's fair. So we'll, I think Kitty will be joining us remotely tomorrow. Yeah, so we'll see how that, if he can answer some of these questions or see how much he knows or how much is left to unpack.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I also, another question I had, and maybe you know this, is that I was trying to figure out, like, technically or legally, maybe legally, since you're a lawyer, the difference between the pre-2020, 2002 stormwater regs and post. Like, why is it, what changed in 2002 that makes the old systems not viable?
The manual in 2002 was substantially different. And it incorporated the concepts that were being litigated at the time around the stormwater impaired waters and contributions to those waters and the measures you needed to take to meet 100% sediment reduction, where 2002 and prior were not. It's not that they didn't address those, it wasn't sufficient to address those standards.
The TMDL, or do we have the current TMDL was 2016?
The stormwater impaired waters, 23, now 15 or 21, I can't remember exactly how many. They were designated in 2000, I think.
Oh, so much earlier
Yeah.
than the lake as a whole. Okay,
So remember, whenever they go out every 3 years and assess all the waters, with a segment of the waters and meeting the water quality standard, it's designated as a pair. And sometimes if it's discrete segments, they don't have to go to a TMDL, or they can do another plan, but the waters that were impaired for stormwater it was pretty much significant segments or significant lengths of, so they designated most of those waters.
okay, and is that when they created the MS4 communities for the community, oh, is that earlier?
I mean, so MS4 is a separate permit under the Federal Clean Water Act. And it's generally population specific, and they was phased in. There's a phase 1 and phase 2, and then there's RDA, residual designation authority, to designate any municipality as a MS4. So Vermont did phase 1 and largely escaped because we didn't have the population centers that were, but then phase 2 came and there was those centers that were designated, and then it was determined that one way to deal with stormwater impaired waters, because coming up with the TMDL with them, those stormwater impaired waters are impaired for flow. But they were going to use sediment as a surrogate, and that was creating complications. And so they decided to designate any municipality except one that had a stormwater impaired water and make it an MS4 and make it part of the MS4 permit, and it requires part of the MS4 permit a flow control provision instead of using sediment. Then the one that's out Flyers, Moonbrook, and Killington, I think, and they're dealing with that stuff.
Okay. I just get the feeling that some of the questions that we might ask them, they already have answers to.
Mhm.
I also get the feeling that we might have less wiggle room than we would want.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have a ton of wiggle room, just consequences.
Right, yes, I mean, if we wiggle to one side, then it comes to something over here, it's like if we reduce the 3 acres, then there are more properties that come on, if we take out residential, there's more commercial that has to go. If the other thing I was thinking about is like, you know, one of the things that really struck me yesterday was the complication of creating the HOAs and having multiple landowners have to band together and create this thing that they don't want to. And with good reason, like I can't imagine if I were told suddenly, you know, I had to go into this agreement with all of my neighbors in East Middlebury, I'd be like, oh.
Do I trust you?
And well, it's just, there's so many different dynamics when you do that, so I was thinking like prioritizing single owner properties or, you know, or like properties with the least number of owners, and it does sound like they have done that. So that's the thing, like, I think having them talk about how they have prioritized, because they prioritized schools, because they're easy to, you know, they know who they are. Prioritize mobile home parks, because they have an association and a board already that they can deal with and go into an agreement with. They prioritized places where the municipality has, you know, been a willing partner, and so anyway.
Yeah. No, fair enough. There's some, so before I forget, because your question made me remember that one of the things that I think would be useful, particularly when we get to, at some point presenting this on the floor, having some kind of a timeline of, you know, in the 80s, this was the rule. So if you built a house in the 80s, this is what you would have had to conform to. And then in 2002, things changed, or you know what I mean, like just laying out, if you built a house in a neighborhood during any one of these time periods, what would the standard have been? Does that make sense?
Yes, but it's not the whole story.
Okay,
So there was a time frame, the late nineties, early 2000s. NAR was not renewing or not issuing permits. And they were just doing what's called an administrative continuance of the permit.
mhm,
And that created properties or developments, subdivisions
Sorry.
that were that were in violation,
mhm,
and many of them have done, most of them were pre 2002. And so you have these subdivisions, some of which were at fault on their own,
mhm,
that caused their permitting issue, and some of them it's because A&R didn't
mhm.
issue or renew their permit properly. And so it's not just that standard.
Mhm. Yeah.
Developers, all know.
Yeah.
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 So I could just anecdotally, I used to live in one of these subdivisions. I no longer do. But the history was the permit was given to the developer for a planned unit development where no house is on it yet, not even a road on it yet. But he had a permit. Once he sold all the lots off individually for individual construction, about 60 to 70 lots, he didn't transfer the permit with those, and there was no HOA. So every single one of those lots has a permit fee, because it doesn't have a valid permit. There's no HOA to take on the permit. There's too many attorneys that live in the neighborhood that form an HOA. And it's an orphan system.
Yeah.
And is that one of the developments that is now being required to do this?
Yes.
Yeah. And when was it developed? In
80s.
the eighties? And so it used to have a permit, so it's on the list because it used to have a permit. And
Permit was not renewed in that period when A&R was not renewing permits. And additionally, the developer never properly transferred the permits.
so both the developer and the agency done mess up, and now the people who live there.
And then the developer died.
Yes, go ahead.
It's kind of like the dirty John, and we don't really want to ask him his opinion, but, you know, I think A&Rs, they've got a lot of the information.
Mhm,
And we need to take a 30,000 foot view of the problem,
mhm,
because there are a lot more Richmonds out there.
mhm,
And, you know, the day that Senator Chitney came in and briefed S14,
mhm.
what I said about, I was hearing everything in Rutland County, but we really never saw a lot of action until Chittenden County got affected. So there are a lot of other people out there that know that what's going on, but they're just kind of, they don't want to say anything because they're afraid it's going to negatively financially affect them. So I think we need to take a different view of the problem. I mean, starting with taxable watersheds, you know, because that's, I own land that is at the headwaters of a Flower Brook, which is in the taxable watershed, that if I did something up there, it could affect the whole watershed. You know, I had to get an Act 250 permit to cut my lots. And then, you know, DEC has a handle on new, if the septic is leaking, if it's, they come down and look at it and say, no, you have to replace the system. So it's all part of it, but you know, we need to give the people out there that are on the list now, and the ones that think they should be on it, but not saying a time period where they know we're gonna work on this for 2 years and let the public know.
Mhm. Yeah,
because people are anxious.
yeah,
And financially, it's affecting their sale of their house or their business. And I don't know how to conceptualize that into legalese, but
It already affects the sale of their property.
yeah,
They have, there's a line of cases in Vermont, most people call it Bianchi, but it's really the Hunter Broadcasting case. Which says if you don't have a state issued permit on when required at the time of conveyance, then your property has a defect on it, a title defect. And it may complicate your ability to get title insurance. What property owners have had to do is create, basically escrow accounts where they put in a certain amount of money in which for a durational period is intended to cover any permitting requirements if they occur during that durational period. Well, the problem with this permit is you don't necessarily know how much to put in the escrow.
so before we go on, what I'm hearing is that. Particularly for this study, maybe we should hold off on direction to Ledge Council until we are able to have this a further conversation with folks from A&R to see what they know, see if they're sharpen at least what we are thinking about including in that study. And so I'm thinking about pivoting to use your time well in terms of going back to the draft and starting from the beginning, then since we're gonna hold off on this, study language. But I saw you had your hand up. so-
Yeah, I have one question. I don't know if you'll know this answer, Michael, and this is why I was opening up my computer. Which clearly I shouldn't have done. Is that the big list of properties, you've seen that, right? There's a column that has permit number on it. And some of them have permit numbers. Are those current permits or are those expired permits?
They're like the expired permits.
Okay. And that's, it's that,
Or it could be they have applied. They noticed A&R that they intend to go forward under the general permit. And they were assigned a permit for that,
okay.
but I.
It must be a question for A&R to answer. I mean, I looked, it's always easiest to look in your own district because we know the properties. So, for example, our middle school in Middlebury has a permit number, but our high school doesn't. And I was thinking, is it because our middle school was built in the early 90s? And so it maybe had a permit then, but based on what you were saying, it sounds like that's when they weren't issuing permits.
Well, in the early 90s, they would have proceeded
Okay.
more of the late.
Oh, is it more the late 90s? But if that is the permit number from the early 90s, that's probably an expired permit, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead, and then I would love to, yeah.
so, to do nothing is not an option. We know we have to fix, all right? I know we can start with, the city of Rutland was issued a flow, restoration plan. And they never did anything with it. So the mayor now said, everybody I talk to wants to fix the problem. And they're saying, but upstream from me, this flow is affecting a lot of properties along the Muddy Brook, the Muzzy Brook, I think it is, in the city. So I think A&R probably has done a lot of good. And I'm not sure if they've kept track of it, keeping score of what the good things that they have to do and they've already done, but that's, if they're gonna take a 30,000 foot view of it, they ought to take credit for the things we've done. And start there.
Yeah. Realizing that you probably have to go very soon.
Yeah, I'm here until 10.
Oh, amazing, okay. Okay, well,
Or come back,
what's that?
have Larry come back.
Well,
Well, he's here,
yeah,
his bill.
Oh,
let's do like a little bit more of this and then we'll get to other segments. So just sticking with 481, I would love to at least talk through this very first part. Section 1 about impact fees and whether or not we want to change that word.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you hear testimony about that?
We did. We heard from multiple folks that it would be useful to take out the word impact and leave fees to keep it broad.
So they don't wanna be construed as triggering the municipal impact fee statute and therefore having to have all of the kind of attached conditions to
Yes.
that.
The RPCs were the first to mention that.
Yeah, true. So,
Yeah.
okay. But, okay. I just,
Go ahead.
so
Yeah, what do you
impact,
think?
impact fees are supposed to be used to address the specific issue concern that they're being charged for. And that's one of the reasons why I use that word, because there's the Supreme Court precedent that said if you start expanding the use of those fees beyond what your original issue is, then it becomes a taking. They're just gonna have to be very careful about the use of these fees for these specific projects. And frankly, the ones that are going to be doing it know that, but I just want to push that on the theory. If they start using these fees to buy like ambulances, then that's a problem.
Is there can you imagine them assessing fees that are not strictly impact fees, but used for the proper uses, or would you then call would those inherently?
So really, they're a special assessment fees, right? They're for that specific geographic area.
Mhm.
And I think by saying may assess municipal fees on users, I think that's okay. I think it's okay.
Can we use special assessment fees?
Yes,
That
yeah.
Yeah, let's say that.
and are impact fees considered a subset of that?
They're potentially, like, I'm trying to think of it, you all know like the Maple Tree Place development in Williston and all of that, it's like, they have a special assessment
Yeah.
district there. Right, but they also have impact fees and assessment fees. So like if you're gonna build a hotel there, they might say, hey, that means there's gonna be more people there and maybe we need you to buy an ambulance. That's an impact.
Do you think it makes sense to say, may assess, special assessment fees or impact?
No, I think just if special assessment is okay.
And, or we can even be more specific and say stormwater special assessment fees, so that it's clear that it's stormwater, not for ambulances.
But it's on the users of the stormwater.
Okay, so
So-
special
Oh,
assessment
okay.
covers it, okay.
Yeah.
And there are two places where impact is used.
Yeah,
We suggest that it goes for the purpose intended.
A special purpose.
For to the user of the cost of the improvement.
and could I might. Looking at the special assessment fee statute, I might change it from special assessment fees to just assessment fees, just. So not to trigger a similar consequence under that statute.
Sure. Okay. Let's go through this, I'd love to get through section 1, and then we'll pivot to the next topic, which is a different bill.
Okay. Well, then the next big issue is page 2. It's the schedule for implementation of the 3-acre permit. in the Champlain, Memphremagog, stormwater impaired waters, so we pushed back from 2023 to 2028.
Mhm.
I love that we're pushing back things that happened 2 years ago.
Yeah, right. So people are like, oh, it's 5 more years. No, it's only 3.
Yeah.
One of the things that I heard yesterday was that notice was given to municipalities at first, and then only to individual households when if people were past due. And so wondering about adding into this somewhere that notice shall be given to all affected property owners, and not just the municipalities ahead of time.
That sounds good, because I was a little surprised that some people just got those letters last fall, which was a year after 2023.
Mhm.
But the municipalities were told the year before.
Mhm. That's what I heard,
Yeah, interesting.
yeah.
So there was money made available to municipalities to help their citizens come into compliance, and some availed themselves of that.
Mhm.
Some did not. Some municipalities said this is not our problem.
Mhm. Mhm.
And therefore let the state go forward, and the state didn't notify the property owner. I will say that there were letters sent out several years ago. I received one. And so I know that there were efforts made to notify, but I don't think every subdivision received those.
It also might be tricky. I mean, I'm thinking about the couriers who testified yesterday that it was their address that was on record, but there was a whole, like their neighbors who were also implicated didn't get a notice, so maybe there's an issue there.
Yeah, that's just one of the issues of not having the permit properly transferred. And it's on just one property where it's subject, just a couple of properties, when it's really supposed to apply to all of all of the houses or plots in the planning and development. And that's just not proper permit issuance or
Yeah.
permit transfer.
Yes.
I heard of a similar case where there was a subdivision of the actual owner of the property that did the subdivision. So people lived in that house, that's why they got them.
Mhm, mhm.
So that's possibly why nobody else got it.
Are we okay to keep going?
Can I
Yes.
ask Michael a question? So yesterday in the testimony, we heard from the Richmond people who, they had all those maps. I don't know if you saw their maps where.
Seen the song.
Yeah, and there's a development here, and then the one up the hill from them is not part of it. So is it the lines were drawn because the development that was targeted or whatever had a permit at one point and the lines were drawn, but this one up here never had a permit, so they never got targeted? How?
No, it's either the one up here is not 3 acres, and never triggered it.
But how do they decide where the lines were between the?
When they were planned and permitted for development, it's the planned unit development is where the line was set for that in the town. And maybe the one above, again, from my own experience, the one above was permitted after the one that's subject to the 3 acre, and it was permitted, it got a post 2002 stormwater permit, but it drains into the other one.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're talking
And so that's there's multiple equity issues.
Yeah, they said there's literally a culvert that goes right down into there. Okay.
We do need to keep
Sorry.
going, it's okay. Just thinking about this language on the top of page 3. I'm assuming that. I don't have any objections to that.
Moving back for the non-Champlain and the mega solar fair basis of 2038.
Yeah.
We're not native in 5 years at their binding.
Yeah.
Waste of allocation. Okay.
Okay.
Alright.
Okay, with that, we're gonna transition to, so we'll mark that like we got to here. And we're gonna switch gears and hear from Representative Sakowitz. Welcome.
Thanks to be here. Good to see you all.
Good to see you. Okay, we still have the forum.
So Larry Sackwitz from Representative Sackwitz from Randolph. I'm here to talk about H 31, Act relating to technical corrections to fish and wildlife statutes. As the title implies, the bill is mostly technical changes.
Before you get going into
Yeah.
do we have a copy of this?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was too busy working on
It's okay.
next week.
No worries, I just to have it, put it up as a copy.
Absolutely, no problem.
Definitely helpful. Sorry.
You're fine.
Oh, you're not really.
Yeah,
It's
so,
another bill. That's.
wait, is that the C-31?
Also.
There we go.
Can I give you one?
I need one, thank you. Okay, good.
Okay. Oh, so you need one now?
No, he's good. Okay. All right,
You
thank
okay?
you. I think we're good now. Sorry about that, no worries.
No problem. Yeah, so it is really mostly technical changes, starting with some that are needed to align with state statute and the Fish and Wildlife Board rules. But in there is one substantive change, which is that snaring of animals goes from a 10-point to a 20-point violation, but the others are all just conforming, changes, updates. The bill further updates some antiquated language, and then in addition, some other technical issues. There was one piece of the bill which I don't think is in front of you because it was as introduced on the House side, where there was a section that concerned adding air guns and some other weapons to rifles and shotguns, which would be weapons that you cannot carry loaded in a vehicle. And apparently, for a long time, just having rifles and shotguns on that list was fine because there was no other available ways of killing wildlife at a distance. But in recent years, there's additional newer technology. And one piece of that technology is what in the bill was called an air gun. And it's not an air gun like a BB gun. It's a serious weapon. You know what those are. They can take down deer at long distances. And so the idea from Fish and Wildlife was that they would be adding in that kind of weapon to the list. But then they also thought, well, while we're at it, let's see if we can get ahead of the technology and just ban all these kinds of weapons. So we don't have to keep coming back to the legislature to do this again and again in the future. Inadvertently, though, the language that they gave us would also have included handguns. And so we ended up striking that section. We were going to just include air guns as it was written, but then there was concern in the committee that we didn't have a definition of air gun, and we didn't have time to create one with due diligence before our crossover. So the committee is hoping that perhaps you might look at the topic of air guns during your deliberations and maybe come up with a definition that would be a workable definition. That's pretty much what I got. The rest of the bill, it's not a long bill. The rest of the bill really is quite technical. You would be much better served hearing from Mr. Grady than me on such matters.
I have a question about that substantive piece, moving the points for snaring from 10, you said 10 points to 20 points?
20 points.
Can you just tell us about the logic for that, like what the implications are?
Mr. Grady.
Oh, okay,
If I-
all right.
well, I believe the implications are that it goes from a violation wherein you would be able to continue hunting to one there, you would lose your license
Okay.
on with one, just that one penalty.
Okay, that's what I suspected, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
and so my understanding is that it's there because we really don't want people engaging in that practice, and so increasing the penalty is hopefully deterrent.
Sharing is illegal.
Yep.
It has been for a long
Period.
time, so
Mhm.
you do it, no, you're gonna pay.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, any other questions? Okay, great, super.
Well, nice to see you all, thanks
Yes,
for
we
having me
can
here.
do, yeah, of course. Thank you.
See you again sometime soon.
Okay, I hope so.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
So do you wanna just walk through 231?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so as past the house, the first section strikes from the definitions which apply to all fish and wildlife sections and 10 BSA part 4. And strikes pickerel and pike perch because they are no longer terms that are used. And are basically obsolete.
What would be a more up to date?
Pike is really northern pike. Those are the proper terms.
And are those used elsewhere?
They're not using statute though, but they're used in rules.
Okay, and so that it's covered in rule,
It's covered in law.
so we don't need to have it.
Yeah, you don't need substitutes in statutes. Section 2 relates to the current prohibition on destroying the nest or eggs of wild birds. There is a current exception for pigeons, sparrows, starling, and purple grackle. And what is being clarified here is that the actual names of those birds, because the names in current statute aren't apparently the technically correct names. So first, it's a rock pigeon, and then house sparrows or European starling, purple grackle are apparently not in the state enough for this to apply. And then,
The purple grackle?
Yeah.
Okay,
and then the department would like to clarify that you can't remove these to protect buildings when the nests contain eggs or chicks who are being used by birds for feeding. So no person shall destroy the nests or eggs of wild birds except when necessary to protect buildings. And the nests to be removed contain no eggs or chicks that are no longer being used by birds for feeding. So don't remove actively used nests. Section 3 is something you've already referenced, is to change the uniform point system. There are multiple changes here. I can walk you through them if you would like.
that would be helpful.
So the first page 2, well, actually, let's talk about what this whole thing means. On page 2, line 10, you'll see a person violating provision of this part, 10 VSA part 4, shall receive points for convictions. The default point assessment is 5 points, and you'll see that page 2, line 5. If there is a violation that is not specified as 10 point or 20 point, it's 5 point. And so some of these are being struck, and it doesn't mean that they're no longer going to be a violation. It's that they're not going to be reassigned to 10 or 20. It's that they will be a default. The first change is on snaring, as you referenced. It's being struck as a 10 point and moving to a 20 point. One of the rationales I heard is that snaring has been prohibited for a very long time, and there are still people out there potentially being part of the process, and they want there to be a more significant consequence. On page 3, top of the page in subdivision Y. This is about reporting taking of moose under appendix 33, section 1413. It doesn't need, it's duplicative because it's about you'll see appendix 2 on that same line. Appendix 2 is about reporting big game, taking big game. Moose are big game. It's duplicative to have reporting a moose and reporting a big game. They are effectively the same thing.
Sorry, where is the big game covered?
That's appendix 2. So you see page 3, line 1, and on subdivision there.
Oh, I see appendix 2, so it's already.
Yeah. Page 3, line 4, appendix 37. This is basically, instead of it saying as it applies to any deer limits under that, it's really about the novice season as a whole. Deer limits are in another appendix, and this is about novice season. And the novice is it's kind of like youth hunting, but you're not a youth. You can go out as with another licensed hunter. The next change I think is in QQ. This is the point violations for violating rules related to possession of a cocked crossbow in a vehicle, vessel, or airplane. It's not being struck entirely, it's just being moved to 4502BH, which is I don't know where it's at. It's already listed. It's already a violation, it's already a 10-point violation, so it doesn't need to be set out here.
I apologize. This is. I'm sorry, are you saying this is redundant?
It's redundant.
Okay. Okay.
Moving on to page 4 in RR. That is being moved to 4502 B3L. Where is that? So this it's still going to be a penalty, but it's going to be covered under a different section. And the problem, unfortunately, with how I drafted this is I left out some of the ones where it will be covered. And then for 20-point assessments, in page 4, line 5, that is going to be covered. It's because it's not actually no longer accurate. It's the cross reference is no longer an accurate cross reference for the 92, which is not accurate. And then 4745, this is replacing deer with big game. That 4745 is technically about big game and not just deer. Deer are big game. The appendix in O, the references to the appendices, those sections are no longer necessary. Because they are covered elsewhere. Well, actually, that's P. Hold on a second. I don't have a note for O. I'm gonna have to come back
Yeah, that's okay.
on that. I think honestly, it's because most of these are actually, I'm gonna have to come back to you on that.
That's okay, no worries.
And then for P, the references to the appendix sections for turkey season. The reference to the cock crossbow, they are no longer necessary. The cock crossbow is covered in section 4705. And the rest of the requirements that are referenced in section 6.2 are already in appendix 22. And then in U, this clarifies that a violation of the deer management rules, 20-point violation, excluding the deer youth hunting weekend and the novice violations. And then the cock crossbow is being moved to 4705. And reporting big game is being added, because that is going to be a violation. And then W, crossbow hunting, that is being struck because crossbow hunting is now allowed. It's not a violation of crossbow hunting.
I'm sorry, can we go back to you for a second? How is this reporting big game? Now a violation, if you don't report,
So it is a violation of appendix 37 of the deer management rule. It's a 20-point violation. Except deer hunting weekend, except novice season, except limitations on feeding deer, except reporting big game. And that's because reporting big game is already a violation under appendix 2. And it's a 10-point violation.
okay, and so why is it being added here?
It's to exclude it from the 20-point
Oh,
violation. Because it's a 10-point violation on the top of the page.
Got you, okay, thank you. It's actually excluding it from the 20-point violation.
Excluding it from the 20-point, but it's still a 10-point.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
On page 4, line 21. Striking the point assessment for crossbow hunting because crossbow hunting is now legal with a permit. Same change, page 5, line 2.
Same,
Then page 5, line 4 in Z. Oh, these ZAA, BD, they're all being struck because it's no longer about those specific sections, it's about appendix 44 as a whole. And use of two drop traps under that, taking fur bearers from poison under 44, and taking fur bearers from the 10. You might remember that you directed the board to revise the rules for taking fur bearers. And when they did, they renumbered all of the sections. And so those sections that are listed are no longer accurate. And the department's just saying, okay, just list 44 and say use of two drop trap. And then you'll see Snre animals being added as DD as a 20-point violation. Page 5, line 10, section 4, this is where the language that Representative Sackwitz was referencing about how the department currently has authority in statute to prohibit a loaded shotgun or rifle from being carried in your car, or to demand that you present that loaded shotgun or rifle when requested by a warden. And then they added air gun, and then they added or a similar device which expels a projectile, and that expels the projectile could be construed as a handgun. And you can carry a loaded handgun in your car, that is not prohibited. And you are not required to produce a firearm to law enforcement when requested, even though statute says so for shotguns and rifles. So there was a little bit of a kerfuffle. The department was saying, we already have this authority, we do this already. Advocates are saying, you don't have the authority to do it under the recent gun precedent in courts. And it would apply to handguns. It really just diverged from the department's intent to bring in air guns under this authority and similar devices. You really need to see an air gun in action. It's impressive. It's also scary. And they are a weapon of choice for those who are out illegally taking deer, because they're silent, they're effective, and they work.
Until this is legal,
Pardon?
and until this goes out.
Well, you still cannot use an air gun. It's still not an authorized way to take an
You
animal.
could have them.
But you can still possess an air gun. There's nothing prohibiting possession of an air gun. So moving on from there, section 5 relates to civil penalties for violation of use of water. So as Senator Bondurant remembers, you just passed the use of water rule related to wake boats. And
I'm sorry, I apologize, can we get back to 4 real quick? So. All of, okay, so what was deleted was
the amendment,
the amendment,
the existing statute still
That's still there.
exists.
okay.
And any issue with the legality of that is not being addressed.
Okay, but but section 4 is still there, it's kind of a place.
Well, one of the things that we do when you take out an entire section kind of at the last minute to avoid renumbering issues is to just delete the section. And that's what we did.
Okay. Okay, thank you, all right, now I'm mentally there with section 5.
So you passed the directive for A&R to adopt rules under the use of water rules for wake boats. The use of waters rules is enforced by A&R under its default enforcement authority. But these boats are out there using waters and potentially engaging in violations, and which are vessel requirements are usually enforced by DMV, state troopers, law enforcement underneath a separate statute, the statute 23 VSA 3317, which is amended in section 5. What this section would do would be allow for that use of waters rules to be enforced under this section by DMV, state troopers, wardens as a violation of this section with penalties under this section, because A&R, they have like 7 or 8 enforcement authorities. They're not out there, officers. They're not out there policing the lakes the way that wardens and troopers are. But wardens and troopers don't have the ability to enforce DEC's enforcement provisions. You're giving them the ability to issue a fine for violation of the use of waters rules. When that's what section 5 does.
You're over time, I didn't realize you probably have to go. I have questions about this, I can hold off, you can talk about it later.
Okay.
Okay. And we'll come back to this last part. Section 5, this is about use of waters.
Because it already says in that section that use of waters rules are going to be enforced under 10 BSA chapter 201, which is DEC's enforcement authority.
mhm,
But then it says or under this section. That's the new language, is or under this section.
yeah,
So giving ability to enforce underneath the DMV troopers, wardens authority. And then the next section of law just amends the judicial bureau authority to allow for civil penalties and judicial for violation of the use of waters.
okay. I have some thoughts about a potential amendment that's somewhat related to this, but we can talk about it.
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, yeah. Okay,
I don't think, because we've been getting on.
okay, oh, we have a long break,
Yeah.
that's okay. All right,
Speaks to our-
surprise, that's great, all right, we have a break
Till 11.
till 11. All right.
He's tough.
Where's